And thank you for joining us this evening for the inimitable Isabel Allende. I know some of you have traveled very far and really appreciate you making the effort, but thanks to all of you who came out for this remarkable woman. I want to thank you also for your generous donations to Literacy by the Bay, our new 501c3 nonprofit. This support not only helps keep our independent bookstore alive and well, but even more important, your money is helping children, young adults, people of all ages and backgrounds grow as successful readers, writers, and communicators. It's a shocking statistic, but 54% of all adults in America have less than a 6th grade level of literacy, and we intend to change that. Literacy really can change everything. It can change lives, it can break the cycle of disadvantage, and that's what we're doing. By improving literacy, we are enriching and inspiring lives, as well as our community, I firmly believe. So you are making a difference, and we're very grateful. Thank you. Before I introduce our guest of honor, I want to thank Jeff Sharash at the Spinnaker. Jeff, are you here? I say this at every one of our events that we do here, but I'm going to say it again. There is no other restaurateur in town who supports the community as much as the Spinnaker and Jeff Sharash. So please support him. I also want to quickly remind all of you who pre-ordered and purchased a copy of The Wind Knows My Name. This is a rare advanced reader copy here. It doesn't publish until June, as I think you all know, but at that point, when we get them in our store, we will notify you, and you can come pick it up, or we will mail it to you for free. So just an update on that. Meanwhile, we do have a comprehensive collection of Isabel's other work available for sale. If we don't have something you want, we can get it. Jeff Battis, our book buyer and managers over there, happy to help you after the event. And finally, Isabel will not be, I think a lot of you know this, she doesn't really sign books in public anymore. She makes very few rare public appearances, and she's just not signing in public anymore. But we do have book plates that she has signed. So you'll be able to get one of those. So I think that's it. Most of you here probably, for most of you, you don't need an introduction to Isabel Allende, but I'm going to do it anyway. She is a writer, a feminist, a philanthropist, an advocate for social justice and human rights, and someone committed to living passionately, which we'll talk about later today. She really is an icon in the literary world, and I think you would all agree with me. She's one of the most widely read authors in the world, the most widely read Hispanic author, having sold more than 77 million books. Widely read Hispanic author. It's awesome. A Chilean who was born in Peru, Isabel won worldwide acclaim, as many of you know, in 1982 when she published her first novel, The House of Spirits. Since then, she's authored more than 27 best-selling, critically acclaimed books: Daughter of Fortune, Island Beneath the Sea, Paula, Japanese Lover. I could go on and on. You probably, if we had more time, I'd want to know what everyone's favorites are, but we don't have time for that. Her work has been translated into 42 languages. Wow. In 1996, she established a charitable foundation in honor of her daughter Paula, which has awarded grants to more than 100 nonprofits worldwide, delivering life-changing care to hundreds of thousands of women and children, girls. More than 8 million people have watched her TED Talks on leading a passionate life. We'll talk more about that later as well. And she's received way too many honorary doctorates and awards to name, but I will mention her Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, presented by President Obama in 2014.
It's working? Yes. I'm not lucky with this panic microphone. They don't work very well with me.
Isabel, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Really
It means so much to me, your support of our independent bookstore and our programs for literacy. I think we're just going to get right into this so that we have time at the end for some questions and answers with the audience. But We're going to talk tonight about Isabel's writing, her feminism, and her passionate life. And because the latter two seem to inform so much of your writing, the passion and the feminism, we're going to start talking about that. Your novels weave a lot of social injustice and politics, but also love and romance, strong female characters who really like sex. Not always with
There's nothing wrong with it, is it? As my mother would say. My mother at 98 had erotic dreams. So
it's genetic then. It's genetic. I hope you've read her memoir, Soul of a Woman, because it will explain why she writes the way she does and her feminism. But in that book, you say you were a feminist when you came out of the womb. And the book has been heralded as an quote-unquote inspiring meditation on what it means to be a woman. And I agree, I've given it to about 30 of my girlfriends. So I'd love to have you talk about that to begin with.
about the book?
Well, and about just being your feminism.
Well, that book started because I gave a speech in a women's conference in Mexico some years ago, and it went viral. And so my publishers in Spain wanted to publish it as a little book. And I said, just let me read it. It was so dated. It was so awful. It sounded like written in the Middle Ages. And it was only a couple of years ago, because things have changed so fast. Since the Me Too movement, and since the young women are in the streets taking off their clothes and protesting and LGBTQ or whatever more, all that wasn't there when I had written the speech, and it wasn't a long time ago. So I had to sort of rethink the whole thing, and I started by my own trajectory. I am 80 years old, and I have lived a long time as a feminist, so I've seen all the waves come and go, and the backlash, and how successful the patriarchy has been to depict feminists as these hairy, smelly bitches. And in spite of that, we've been doing stuff. So one thing that I think I discovered in writing the book is that the fact that we have not achieved everything that I thought we would achieve when I was a young woman doesn't mean that we have failed. Yeah. It means that the struggle is much longer, and there's much more to do, and I won't see the end of it, but it doesn't matter, somebody else will. So it's been very comforting to write that book and get the feedback from young women today who are so strong and independent and connected and informed. We were not like that when I got started. Everybody thought that I was a lunatic. But really, my mother took me to a psychiatrist. I'm not kidding. Well, when I was little, I must have been such a mess. Such a mess. First of all, I was the shortest person in the room always. Always, since I was born. So when I was little, they would take me to a gym and hang me upside down. My mother says, no, they hang me from the neck. Not upside down. And I would go every week, and 2 or 3 times a week, and hang there in winter in Chile. The only thing that grew was my neck. And I remained short, but I was also a feminist when nobody talked about it. So my mother thought I was never going to get a husband, and there was something wrong with me. So off to the psychiatrist to see what was wrong with this girl.
Hanging you upside down didn't work. It did not work. So, feminism is such an, it has gone through many stages and cycles, and in my lifetime as well. And I think what you do so well is the characters in your books are very strong women, but they're vulnerable and
but it's not opposed. It's not a contradiction. The fact that you want your rights and you want to have a life, doesn't mean that you're not feminine, that you don't like men, that you don't want to be a mother, that you can be everything, everything.
Thank you for saying that, because I think that there's confusion about that. People think, well, if you're feminist, you have to be really strong, you can't be gentle, you can't be loving, you have to be this hardcore driven, and...
I am a hardcore feminist, and the first thing I do in the morning before my husband opens his eyes is put on makeup. That's feminist. He has never seen me without makeup. Well, the truth is that I've only had it for 3 years. Well, you know, it's wonderful to get married when you're old, because probably he will last forever. My husbands usually last between 20 and 28 years. And I don't have that much time with Roger. But I am much stronger than him. So if he dies before, I will for sure have a fourth husband. Because I like men and I don't want to be alone. So that's feminism.
Thank you. One of the things you talk about in Soul of Woman is impatient love. Can you explain that?
Patient love? You know, I have 3 grandchildren. And first of all, no one wants to have children. So my family ends here. And then my grandchildren take their time with relationships. And they go in the internet and they find people, and then there's a long time of doubt. Well, it didn't happen that way in my generation or in my life. It was impatient. You liked a guy, you attacked him. And somehow got him. And if he didn't take the initiative, you managed it somehow. There was a sort of urgency that I don't see in lovers today. I mean, everything is very relaxed and this. What? That's not love, in my opinion. So when I met Roger, well, let me tell you how I met Roger.
Husband number 3.
Number 3, yeah. I had divorced my husband after 28, my second husband, after 28 years of marriage, and I was 74. So when we divorced, everybody said, but are you crazy? You're going to be alone at 74? Well, it's the same to be alone at 24 or at 74. And on the other hand, it takes a lot of courage to stay in a relationship that is not working. So I divorced, thinking I'm going to stay alone for the rest of my life. But life is weird. And a guy heard me on NPR, living in New York. He started emailing me every morning and every evening for 5 months. He was the perfect stalker. And then finally, when we met, in less than 3 days, he wanted to marry me. So it's funny because I said, look, first of all, when we met, he invited me out for lunch first. And so we were talking, and then I said, look, what are your intentions? Because I have no time to waste. I'm 74 years old. He panicked, and he choked on the ravioli, but he didn't back off, you know, in a way. And so 3 days, that night I said, would you stay with me in the hotel? Because of course, if he has intentions, you want to try him. You're not going to get in a relationship blindly. You have to take a look.
Well, you know, why waste your time otherwise? Why waste time? You know,
Of course, I can't waste time. I was too old. So he said, you know what he said? I didn't bring my toothbrush. Can you believe it? In any case, 3 days later, he wanted to marry me. And I said, look, forget about marriage. But you can be my lover if you're willing to come to California. So he would take the plane and come to California for a night and then go back to work on Monday. And so then finally, he sold his house, gave away everything, and moved to California to be with me. And then he kept on with the idea, let's get married, why? We're not going to have kids. Why are we going to get married? And then one day, his granddaughter, who was 7, Anna, went to the librarian in her school and said, Miss, have you heard from Isabel Allende? And the librarian said, yeah, I think I might have read one of her books. Why? There was a pause, and Anna said, she's sleeping with my grandson. That was it. I had to get married because we were being sick. So those are the women that are in my books. And when people say, well, where do you get these strong women? Because I meet them everywhere. Through the foundation, I meet extraordinary women. I don't need to invent them at all.
And one of the things that you said in your TED Talk, in case you're one of the 8 million people who did not see it on YouTube, is that the heart is what drives us, the passionate heart. And you do that, you live that, and you also do it in your books with your female characters. Whether they're right or wrong, whatever the cause is, they're very passionate about it. They're really driven.
I think that passion is a capacity to take risks, that you're not afraid of life. So what's the worst that can happen? That you suffer. And so what? So what? What's the problem?
Builds character, right?
We are going to suffer anyhow, sooner or later. So let's suffer for things that can give you some pleasure.
We can go back to the bedroom in a little while. But first, I wanted to talk about so many of your books are historical fiction, which I love because I learned reading so much. When I read Along Petal of the Sea, I had no idea how grueling that Spanish Civil War was and what the exiles and the refugees went through, and then of course the 1973 coup in Chile with your father's cousin Salvador Allende and the exiles, and what I'm leading up to is that history repeats itself, and you are very informed, and her books are educational as well as entertaining, and it's just my favorite genre. So you don't shy away from big topics: corruption, violence, war, cruelty, sexism, chauvinism, fascism, child abuse. You have it all in there. But I guess what the books also illustrate to me, Long Petal of the Sea, as well as your new book that's coming out, The Wind Knows My Name, is The Wind Knows My Name. It's about Vienna, World War II, and the kinder transport, and children getting relocated, and then in Central America, and children getting relocated, and now, and to today, with kids in cages on the border. So, are we going back in time? Is it getting worse? Is it getting better?
I think these things have always happened. We know more. We know more now, and the world seems so awful. It seems that we are trapped in a planet that is dying. That there's no future. That there's violence. Well, we know more, but the world has never been any better. I write historical fiction, and I research about the past, and I can tell you that we are better off now in spite of everything. And those people who think that going back to the past will bring peace or the family, or no, the world evolves and changes. But now we have more educated people than ever, less people that die of hunger than ever. We are in a better position now than ever before. And I can say this because I wasn't so optimistic until recently. But my grandson, Alejandro, sent a questionnaire. And with all these questions, how are we better off in education? How many people are? And I answered it. Most of my replies were wrong. I was wrong. So this pessimistic thing, we have to get over it and fight for a better world. But don't get upset because things don't work. They have never worked. No, really, never. They have only worked for an elite, for a few people who have had the resources, those people can say it was a better world because they had slaves, because they had serfs, because it was another world in which they were privileged. And today we have those privileged people also, but there is more for everybody. Even if we think about life expectancy when my grandmother was born was 40 years old. So things have changed enormously, and we have to be grateful for that. Before you could die because you had a rotten tooth.
So it is better, and that's good perspective to keep in mind for everyone, I think. So we're not totally doomed by our human nature. But
we are doomed anyhow.
But I'm going to turn to one of your other favorite topics, and that's the patriarchy versus the matriarchy. I forget what program I was watching, but quote unquote Isabel Allende, men run the world and it's a mess. War is a male construct. Yes, it's better maybe, but what can we do to make it better faster?
I think
and is a matriarchy really better?
Well, we don't know. We have never tried it. I think that it's not the idea of changing the patriarchy for a matriarchy. I think the idea is to have an administration of the world that is equal in gender, that we have same number of men and women and others in power with equal power, and that we all make the decisions together. And maybe that will be a better world. I don't think that a matriarchy alone can change things. Maybe it can change things, but we don't know if it will be for the better.
Somebody needs to write that utopian novel versus all the dystopian novels that are coming out. Okay, can you talk a little bit, because I know this was something that captivated me with House of Spirits, maybe the first magical realism I read. Can you talk about the importance of magical realism in your writing, blending magic and myth, mystery and dreams, because they're woven through so much of your writing. I love it.
Well, first of all, what is magic realism? There's a difference between magic realism and fantasy. Fantasy is something that we never see the effect of it. For example, and I repeated this many times, so if you heard it, I'm sorry. Fantasy would be the invisibility cloak of Harry Potter. We have never seen that. We have never seen anybody turn invisible because they put on a coat. Magic realism would be the invisible Indians in the Amazon, who paint their bodies in the colors of nature and move so swiftly in the vegetation that they can be a yard away and you don't see them. So that's magic realism. So the difference is that there is first an explanation for it, and then a manifestation in real life. So what we say, for example, prophetic dreams, all those things that we believe in most of the world. And Americans think that you don't have magic realism, but you buy crystals, you go to astrologers, you go to psychics. I mean, this is worse than in any other place that I have known. But of course you are not into that. That's for other people. So I grew up only the first few years of my life with my grandmother, who spent her short life experimenting with the paranormal at the time when that was the fashion. People were doing seances. It was the time of the Rosacruces, of all those movements, those spiritual movements, and the idea that we could communicate with the dead through these seances. So my grandmother she and three other friends, these four crazy lunatic ladies, they were called the White Sisterhood, and they would gather every Thursday for seances. And apparently they could move the big oak table, a Spanish table, would move twice for yes and one for no when the spirits answered. I have the table in my house, and you need two men to move it. I have never seen it jump around. But once, it was Suzanne, I think, someone came, her cousin, came to my house and couldn't sit at the table because she felt that the table was charged with something. Two people that I know have had that experience. And I wish I could see any of it, because it would be wonderful to be able to tell you I have a dancing table, but I don't.
Well, I believe in all of that, and
I know, you Americans believe in anything. you believe in the stock market.
No, I didn't do that. No. Okay, now one last sort of serious question, and then we can have some more fun questions. You have often said that you will always be a foreigner here in America, but you are also a foreigner in your own country, and you write so eloquently about exile and relocation, the immigrant experience, which it's a very popular genre these days. But how long do you think it takes? I mean, my family may have come over on the boat after the Mayflower, but we were all immigrants. But now we feel it's our home. Does it take 2 generations, 3 generations, or I don't think you will ever feel. I mean, but
no, I think that the first generation immigrant or refugee never feels at home. Never. Because you will always have an accent. You will always be different. And but the second generation who are born here, they don't want to know about the old country. And I think they adapt very easily. The fact that I feel foreigner is not bad. It's not a bad feeling. I feel foreigner in Chile as well. I go back and I am fine for a week. And then I realize that I don't belong there either. Because I have changed, my country has changed, the world has changed. And there's nothing there of what I had before. And that's something that happens to most refugees. You know that the average time that a refugee spends away from home is between 17 and 25 years. Many of them leave with the key of their house in their pocket, wanting to go back and hoping to go back. And there is no home to go back. And even if they did go back, their children would not go with them. So there's the terrible choice of going back to an imaginary, invented country, or staying with your kids and be always a foreigner. And in my case, I am very happy here. I'm a very happy Californian. But I am a foreigner, that it's obvious. And here I am among friends, and it's great. Now, when I go to Macy's, it's not the same. I am this little Mexican when I go to Macy's. So here I feel really comfortable. Just wait.
You start, I don't know if other people in the audience may know this, but Isabel starts a new book every January.
January 8th.
January, now what's the significance of that?
Discipline. If I didn't...
Oh, the Epiphany, is that the 8th?
No, I don't know. The 8th was the date that I started the House of the Spirits in 1981.
Okay.
And so I started all my books on January 8th out of discipline, and it works. It really works. I get a lot of people who want to write a book or are in the middle of trying to write a book. And I said, well, inspiration is important, but the time that you dedicate to it is more important. And you have to be disciplined. I just watched a movie that is wonderful about Salinger, the Catcher in the Rye. And the movie talks about him trying to get published, and working to get published. And finally, he hits the mark with Catcher in the Rye and becomes a celebrity. The next day, he's a celebrity, 65 million copies sold. I mean, incredible. And then he realizes that it's killing him. That what he really wants is the discipline of writing. And he ends up living in a barn where he locks himself in to write and never publishes again. And he died at 91 with never publishing another book. So that's the love of the job, the love of the process. And I keep saying, if you don't love the process, in the movie there's the editor at one point says, are you willing to write even if you get nothing in return? And he thinks about it and says, no, no, then you're not a writer. And as when he publishes, when he becomes famous, he realizes that yes, he can. That's what he wants, to write for the heck of it. Now, if you ask me, I wouldn't write a word if I couldn't sell my books.
Isabel, do you ever get writer's block? And if so, what do you do about it? Writers, I love all the things different writers do with writers.
I got writer's block after my daughter died, and I just couldn't do anything. But then, I remember, well, first of all, I did a trip to India, because somebody said, if you come out of your comfort zone and you are exposed to something absolutely different, the juices come back. You can fill up your reservoirs again. And that helped a lot. And when I came back, I remembered that I am a journalist by training. And if I am giving a subject and time to research, I can write about almost anything. Well, not football or politics, but almost anything. And I gave myself a subject. I had been for 3 years in a hole. I wasn't depressed, I was just very sad, and I couldn't do anything. Everything seemed tainted by death and loss and mourning. Although my grandchildren were being born and life went on, I couldn't see it. And so I gave myself a subject that would be as removed from pain and sorrow as possible. And I decided to write a non-fiction book about lust and gluttony. The only deadly sins that are worth the trouble, let me tell you. It's interesting because the bridge between those two sins is aphrodisiacs that were invented to enhance lust. And before Viagra was invented, it was food and herbs and that kind of thing. And of course, naked women. And I started the research, and there is innumerable cookbooks with all kinds of stuff. And almost everything is aphrodisiac if you read between the lines. But there's very little good eroticism that you can research from. So I would go to the pawn shops in San Francisco, where else? My mom would come to visit. My mom was this old lady Catholic, and she was depressed at the time, so she would dress in black with a kerchief here. And I would take her because I couldn't leave her behind in San Rafael, so I had to bring her with me to the pawn shops. And my mom spoke very little English, so I had to translate. So there would be these rubber things there, no? And my mom would put on her glasses, come very close. I said, what does it say here? And I had to translate, she couldn't believe it. And I remember in one of the places there was a chaise longue that you would sit down and press buttons and it would vibrate in strategic places. And while I was buying some books or whatever, my mom was lying there. So that, of course, took me out of my depression or sadness or whatever. Then after that, I wrote Daughter of Fortune.
That's great.
So writer's block, get your mom to go to a pawn shop.
That leads right into my next question. Julia Child, when asked the secret to her longevity, said gin, beef, and butter. And I'd like to know what the secret, you obviously, it's genetic to some extent, your mother lived long, and you have led a full, passionate life, but what would you say is the secret to your longevity?
Well, I am not decrepit yet, it's only 80. I told you as if I was just going to die tomorrow. My life is not over yet. I think that I am very healthy. I have a purpose. I'm entertained writing, and I have a purpose through the foundation. And I would say that I have a community. The people who really shrivel and dry up when they get older are the people who are alone, who are not in a relationship or in a community, or they don't have neighbors. They start to just shrink. We are gregarious animals to the very last moment of our lives.
Yeah, we are social.
We are social.
And the pandemic made that very difficult. So I would like you to talk a little bit about your philanthropy and your foundation for women and girls. Somewhere in one of your books, maybe Solving Women, I picked up the statistic from you that 80% of all displaced people are women and children. And in this book, there's so many frightening statistics on domestic violence and on children and women who are suffering. I mean, it's my go-to guide for statistics on that front. Can you talk about what your foundation is doing? And I just want to applaud you for it as well, because it's remarkable how many people you've helped.
Well, I don't run the foundation. I just provide the funding. Lori here, my daughter-in-law, runs the foundation. And Nico, my son. I don't know who are here. You know, I'm always cautious when he's around. My son, he's very critical. Very critical. Well, they run the foundation with Sarah, who works also with us. And many people ask me, how can we contribute? And we say, just go to the website, look at all the grantees, and contact them directly, because you get to know the people. And that is the wonderful thing of what Lori, Nico, and Sarah do. They know the people one by one. So we know the cases, we know. Sometimes I say, Lori, this is like a drop of water in a desert of need. It doesn't mean anything. And she says, it's not about numbers. It's about one by one. You can change the life of one person at a time. And the truth is that sometimes with very little investment in money and big investment in relationships and in care, you can change somebody's life. And if we focus on women, whatever changes in the life of a woman changes the family, because the woman invests in the children. If a woman makes money, she will invest all of it in the house of the children. And if the family is better off, the community is better off, and eventually the country. The countries that are most backward and poorer are those in which women have less opportunities and less chances and are less protected. So that's the job we do, try to protect and try to help. And we focus on education, which is really important, because without education you can't have a skill to work. And if you don't have an income, then what can you do? Health, which includes, of course, reproductive rights, and protection from exploitation and abuse and violence.
Well, thank you for all you're doing on that front. I think it's so important to give back to the community, and clearly you have done that in a huge way. So another way you're opening the door. So I have one more question. I just have to ask this. Everybody probably knows that in, what was it, 2006, the Winter Olympics in Italy, Isabel was one of 4 women to carry the flag into the Olympic Stadium. First time that it was all women doing it. And one of the other women was Sophia Loren. And what you talk about a lot in your TED Talk is her legs. But I don't know if was she a nice person?
Oh yeah, she's very nice.
That's all I wanted to know. Okay.
But you know, we were stuck in there, and Lori was with me, we were stuck there for 8 hours in the green room, because that was the year when the day in Denmark, they published some illustrations, and the Muslim community got angry, And so there was this death threat to the Danish team. So the security in the stadium in Turin was incredible. And of course they didn't trust the Italians for the security, I wouldn't either. they brought them from Germany. And so they brought these guys, all in black with gadgets and walkie-talkies and talking to each other and whatever. And we had a guy, Thorsten, who was our bodyguard with us. So we all go to the green room where, because of the security, we had to wait so long. And Sophia Loren was there, of course, and Susan Sarandon was there. And Sophia Loren was all the time eating carbohydrates. Bananas and pretzels and.
How does she stay so skinny?
And she's very tall. She's skinny, except the breasts that are like 2 melons. And so I had to ask her, how do you do it? First she said, everything I have, I owe to spaghetti. That's not true. If you eat spaghetti, you end up like a ball. And then the other thing she says is, I said that you look so young. She was 70-something at the time. And she said, posture. Posture. I am always straight and I don't make old people's noises. And I've tried to follow that example, because really, it's important. And I have seen Sophia Loren now, when she's in her 80s. She still looks fantastic. Looks great from a distance.
Well, you look good from a distance and close up, Isabel. So there you go. Okay, I want to take some time to take questions from the audience. We have another about 10 or 15 minutes, so does anyone have a question?
There's one.
Hola Isabel.
Hola.
I grew up in Venezuela reading the books, and I feel like you helped me develop like sense of feminism since very, very early. I struggle sometimes with the balance of like coming off as like the crazy feminist, especially at work. How would you advise that I like deal with that? Do I just take the label and embrace it, or
Take the label of feminist?
being a feminist?
Yeah. I mean, what the question was, how do you embrace the label of being a feminist? It's hard when you are young and you are in your reproductive stage.
This is at your office, right? Yeah, which is maybe predominantly male.
Yes.
Yeah. They will respect you. I mean, the fact that you can be feminine and a feminist makes you very special and wonderful. And I wouldn't be ashamed of it, on the contrary. On the contrary, I would be very proud of it. And very outspoken and without being aggressive. There's no need to be aggressive. You know, many young men are feminists too. They also understand that the patriarchy makes them victims as well. And so you are in a much better position than I was, because your generation has already achieved a lot. So I wouldn't be shy about it at all.
Thank you.
Yes, in the back there.
Yes, hi. I've been reading a lot lately about indigenous thoughts of the inner world, where it's the more comfortable, more embracing of their inner world. And I wondered, does that relate to maybe the magical mysticism that comes from the Latin American writers, where they seem to be more inclusive of the inner world and bringing that into their outer world, and sort of this mystical dance?
Can you hear the question?
Can you repeat it, please?
Huh?
Can you repeat it, please?
Yeah, I will repeat it. She says that she has been reading a lot recently about the mystical, more spiritual world of indigenous people and how the magic realism is more. Let me tell you that that's a myth, because we all have some kind of spiritual world and inner world, And when we read that it's much better among some people. Think of what's happening today among indigenous people, for example, in El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, places where their gangs have taken over, where this horrible, horrible violence. It's not that they live in a better world. And in every society, in every community, there are people who are very special and who carry on those traditions. But the fact that they are indigenous doesn't shield them from the violence of the world at all. And I think this is something we have to cultivate, each one of us. Each one of us privately, and if possible, join communities where that happens. But there's no one community that has it more. I wrote a book years ago, a young adult novel called City of the Beasts, and it is placed in the Amazon. And at the time, when I wrote the book, it was the time when they contacted the last, one of the last groups of indigenous people that had never been contacted before. And they lived like in the Stone Age. They had no use of metals yet, of anything of the kind. And they lived at war. It's not that they lived in a more spiritual world because they were isolated and they were in the jungle. They were killing each other also. So we have to be very careful with that, making a mythology out of that.
So many questions. Pick one, Isabel.
Yeah.
Hello, hello Isabel. I'm Roxana. I'm from Argentina, and I have been following you for more than 30 years. I think that my first novel was La Casa de los Espíritus, and I read it when I was 16. And I have been buying your books all around the world.
Thank you. She's been buying my books all around. Thank you very much. So what's your question?
My question is this. I read an interview in Goodreads, and you were talking about your first book, La Casa de los Espíritus, and you said, my children were going to university and didn't need me anymore. My life had no direction. I hadn't done anything that I could be proud of. And you kept going, and you were around 40. I wonder if you have any advice for women that were in a similar situation, not in every single thing, but like you, that you dedicated to your kids, and you felt at that age that you were lost.
How old are you?
That
40?
age.
Well, she's talking about something that I wrote, that when I started writing The House of the Spirits, I felt that my life was going nowhere, that I had done nothing that was worth talking about, and my kids were growing up, leaving in a way, and my marriage was collapsing. I didn't have anything that I could be proud of. And then something miraculously happened, that The House of the Spirits was a successful book. And it paved the way for all the other books and saved me in many ways. But that feeling that I had at that age is a feeling that so many women who have dedicated their youth to the family have when the children leave. They feel that the purpose that kept them going and sacrificing everything for them is gone, and now they are left with nothing. And what is even more painful is that often the marriage breaks around that time. And so then you add to that divorce and everything that comes with it. And unfortunately, this is one of the stages in life that we have to go through. Because I have lived so long, I can see in my life crossroads. Crossroads in which life has changed completely. So most of the time, I had no control over the situation at all. And I had to find a new life, a new meaning, a new purpose, often a new place to get started again. And you are forced to do it. There's no way out. So when we were talking about, well, what's the problem with suffering? It's because that is suffering. And we all confront it sooner or later, in one way or the other. And suffering doesn't kill us. It gives us new resources. I feel that in every one of those crossroads, I discovered inside me something that I didn't know I had. And that carried me through. Of course, the writing is something exceptional, but other things as well that I have discovered. For example, I reached a crossroad in my 70s in which I realized that I had to let go of many things. I had to let go of youth, of relationships, of my grandchildren, whom I absolutely adored, and I had been with them every day of their childhood. I had to let go of so many things, including a marriage. And I realized that I had in me the capacity to do that. With some suffering, of course, but I had the capacity to let go, and suddenly I came to the other side with a feeling of incredible freedom. Incredible freedom. I feel that except for, I would say, three relationships that I don't want to let go of, the rest I can let go of. Not only people, but all the material stuff, places, a career, you name it. Everything can go. And that is one crossroad that I came very late. Now, probably, when I'm 85, I will come to the most difficult crossroad, which is when my health fails. And then I have to become dependent. And then I have to learn to be grateful because someone does for me what I am used to do for myself. And that will be such a difficult moment. I have a very good friend, Grace Damon, who was training to climb the Everest. That would be her gift at 60. And she had a head-on collision on the Golden Gate Bridge and became absolutely incapacitated for the rest of her life. All her bones were broken. And after 19 horrible operations, she's in a wheelchair, of course, and many things she can't do. And she says, I am happier now than I ever was before. And I have learned to accept the help that I get and be so grateful for it. And what a lesson, huh? What a lesson. And so I wish I will have that kind of strength and capacity to change when the time comes.
Wow.
Yes.
That was beautiful, thank you. I am enjoying your book covers and some of the books that I have at home that are yours. Are you involved in the artwork and the design of your covers?
The publishers choose the covers and they submit the samples to us. And Lori, who is a graphic designer, picks them up. Sometimes I object. In general, I don't like pink. But if Lori says pink is fine, okay, pink is fine. I can't let go of pink. But it depends on the publisher, and every publisher in every country has a different idea of what will sell, what the readers like. For example, in the UK, they publish exactly the same book with a jacket that is absolutely different. It can be abstract and it looks like a Kleenex box, or it can be like wallpaper, you never know. In other places, the jackets are horrible, absolutely repulsive, and you object over and over, and they keep sending one that is worse than the first. So finally you say, okay, yeah, shit, no, it doesn't matter.
And I will tell you, in a bookstore, we know covers, and they're so important to the sale of a book. And they actually have a competition every year. What are the best book covers that have come out every year?
This was one of the best
I liked it.
of last year.
Yeah.
And the new one is a little similar. They're kind of similar.
I think they have too much pink.
I like it. Okay, and then
Okay,
way,
in the
way
back,
back,
there is
way
someone
back.
who's yelling there.
Señora Isabel,
Dígame.
cuando usted empieza a escribir ese 8 de enero,
Sí.
¿es en español o es en inglés?
Right in Spanish? There are great writers that were born in Hungary and came here and wrote fantastic books in English. I can write non-fiction in English, but I cannot write fiction in any other language but Spanish. You know, all the important stuff in my life happens in Spanish. I dream in Spanish, I count, I pray the few times I pray, I make love in Spanish the few times I can, and so forth. My husband is from Polish descent, from the Bronx, doesn't speak a word of Spanish, but he speaks Latin, because he was raised by the Jesuits, poor guy. And so now he has Spanish classes, because the important things in our relationship, I have to say them in Spanish.
That's great. And we have almost all of her books in the store in Spanish. Her publisher is great, they do Spanish and
All right,
English.
here.
Yeah, I have a question. I've been reading your books like almost like more than 20 years ago. Besides the United States, since your books are so famous and you've been selling more than 77 million, like where else you can see like, oh, these books are selling more there?
The places where my books sell the most
Yeah.
are in Spanish, of course, first. In English, in German, in Italian. Those are the main languages, I would say. And then there are other languages that sell very well also, but the countries are small. So in proportion to the country, they sell incredibly well. But they are small countries. Yes, Iceland.
A couple more questions.
Yeah, okay, here. You.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I've learned so much from the women in your books, and so many of the women have stayed with me as I go through life and navigate my own feminism in my own life. And I'm curious to know, do your characters ever do they stay with you as you go through your life, or once the book is done, is it kind of like out of sight, out of mind? I would love to know.
When I finish a book, I'm so relieved. I hope never to see those people again. I have been with them for at least a year. I hate them. But they keep coming back. Not that I think about them, but then I start writing. 10 years later, I write another book. And then I realize that a character that I had in Daughter of Fortune as a Chinese doctor comes back as somebody else with another name, but it's the same character. There are certain things that I have learned about my writing. I always have strong, independent women that go through difficult situations and always come out of it more generous and happier than before. I have absent fathers, no fathers. There are father substitutes, but never a real father, biological father. My books are about blood, about death, violence, and losses, but also about loyalty and organic justice. I believe that there is justice in a sort of magical way. You pay for what you do, the good and the bad. And that keeps me going, you know, because when I see so much horror in the world, I say, and these people get away with it. And there's total impunity. Well, there's not. I think that eventually there is some kind of balance and justice, and that is a lot of my books. And the other thing that I write a lot about is power. Power in different forms, the power with impunity, the power to abuse and the abuse of power. That's also something that is like one of my demons.
I think one more question.
This lady here came from Miami for one night. What is your question?
Hi, it's me again. Hola. Which one of your main characters of your books is your favorite one?
Which one is my favorite character? Well, of course, Paula, my daughter. But one character that I love is Clara in the House of the Spirits, because she was my grandmother. I didn't have to invent her. She was that crazy lady and adorable at the same time. So when I saw Meryl Streep in the movie, I was sort of shocked because she didn't look at all like that. Yeah. And my grandmother was just this extraordinary person who, as I told you, this group of four ladies, the White Sisterhood, they would be experimenting with telepathy, for example. And so they lived in different neighborhoods of Santiago, and they would be sending each other telepathic messages with apple pie recipes. that never worked, but that was not, according to them, because of telepathy. It was because they were lousy cooks. and she was experimenting with the seances and with always living in another world, in a world of the spirit, in which nothing material really mattered. And she had the idea that there are many dimensions of reality, that we are here in this moment, and we think that this is all there is. But in this room, in this moment, in this space, there are many things happening. Many times before and forward. Many people that we don't know that have died or will be born. Everything is happening simultaneously in different layers of reality. And it's a beautiful idea because it's a much better idea than heaven and hell. It's the idea that you can move to another level and be in another stage, in another place. So all that I grew up with. So when people say, well, where do you get the magic realism? It's not that I live it. I don't live like that. I don't live with ghosts. But I grew up with the idea that the world is a very mysterious place and that everything can happen. And we just don't have an explanation. So let's open the heart and open the mind and let it happen.
Thank you, Isabel. We could go on all night.